Welcome. Today we're speaking with Vince Reardon, author of the new book, The Pocket Mentor, Insider Tips from America's Most Successful People. What good advice did you hear from the people in your book?
The fourth really good piece of advice that I heard from people time and time again in the book was be persistent. None of the people in my book are quitters. If the truth be told, some of them are pretty stubborn and obstinate. They remind you never, and I mean never, give up. And that's what their experience shows. And that's the advice that they pass on. It's very good advice. Because most of us, we give up after the first or second or third time. The people in my book, they're just getting started by the first or second or third rejection or failure. They're just getting started.
And who's a good example of persistence?
There are many people in the book that exemplify the value of persistence, but the one that I think of most often, and I think about her at least every week or two, because she's so inspiring, is Emily Warner. Now that name may not be a household name to many people, but Emily Warner, I believe, is a very important person. She was the first female commercial airline pilot and captain. There were no commercial female airline pilots before Emily Warner pushed open the door, and then they followed right in behind her.
And how did she get hired?
It took about 6 or 7 years for her to get hired. She was a flight instructor. Actually, she ran a flight business. She was the manager of a flight business in Denver. And she was training young men who would step into jobs as commercial airline pilots. She had about 7,000 hours of flight time. The young men that she was training who would become pilots had about 2,500. Year after year after year, she would submit her resumes, she would make calls to the major air carriers. And year after year, they would say, we're not hiring, or they wouldn't exactly say, we're not hiring women, but there were no women pilots. So it was clear to her that they just weren't going to hire her because she was a woman, although she was perfectly qualified, more than qualified, to become a pilot. She was hired by Frontier Airlines, but it was only after she camped outside the office of the flight operations director. She got a 20-minute interview with him. He was impressed. He should have been. She was impressive. He gave her a simulation test. No other pilots had to take a flight simulator test. She did. She passed it with flying colors. And in January 1973, he did the right thing, and he hired the first female commercial airline pilot. She later went on to become an airline captain. She had a great career in the airline industry. In 1973, by the way, she won the Amelia Earhart Woman of the Year Award for becoming the first commercial airline pilot.
Was she accepted by other pilots?
Well, this is the irony. Even after she was hired to be a pilot, the male pilots and even the female stewardesses ostracized her for many months. When they would land in a city and get together and go out for dinner, they would never invite her, so she would have to go out to dinner alone. And that went on for quite some time, but then finally they warmed up to Emily, who's a lovely woman, by the way. I spoke to her on the phone. She's a charming person. They finally warmed up to her, and they did the right thing. They invited her along, and then she said, the boys finally accepted me.
Thank you.